The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Gentlemen, get ready to start your free agent engines. Monday is the legal tampering period, the start of it. Last 2 days, and then by Wednesday, we'll get the official announcement that contracts have been signed. Of course, it'll be anticlimactic because Adam Schefter and his crew will leak everything out long before it gets to Wednesday. But we're on the cusp of that, and it's going to be an interesting weekend with more and more rumors flying. Chicago Bears have said that they are going to trade Justin Fields, or make a decision, I should say, on Justin Fields before the start of free agency. Well, they're running out of time on that. And then round and round we go on the draft quarterback wheel. Is it going to be Caleb Williams? Is it going to be Jaden Daniels? Is it going to be Drake May? We'll find out, but we'll have to wait on that for well over a month and a half. Chris Sims, who does watch tape, I'll give him credit for that. Former quarterback, son of Phil Sims, and now does work with Pro Football Talk, and he does watch film. He's got really, really strong opinions about all three of those quarterbacks, and we'll get to that coming up very shortly. Also, today is the anniversary, a couple of anniversaries. Number one, 94 years ago today, Babe Ruth signed a 2-year, $160 million contract. That was $5,000 more per year than Herbert Hoover, the president of the United States, was making. And as Babe Ruth said, well, I had a better year. He certainly did in 1929 because 29 was the stock market crash. But here, less than 6 months later, he's getting that kind of money in a period of time where he didn't have a lot of leverage. You know, the reserve clause kept him with the Yankees, but he was such a star that they couldn't have him hold out. So he ended his holdout today, and on this day, I should say, in 1930, and signed that contract. And the general manager of the Yankees at the time said, there will never, ever be a bigger contract. Shohei Ohtani, $700 million. $700 million versus 94 years ago, $160,000. And I don't even know if it was guaranteed. I guess it was. I guess they didn't have provisions where they could get out of it, but who knows? That happened 94 years ago. And then 53 years ago was the most significant sporting event of my lifetime. Ali Frazier won at Madison Square Garden. And boxing may have been bigger at one time. I'm told in the 50s it was. But in my lifetime, I can't remember not just a boxing event, but a sporting event with more buildup to that and the actual fight outrunning the hype. It was just an incredible night at Madison Square Garden. And here we are 53 years later, and we've got news now that Mike Tyson, at age 58, is going to come back. I saw his last fight. I was there in person at then MCI Center, and he fought Kevin McBride. He was done then. And now he's going to be 58 when this fight is supposed to take place. I have my doubts. I'm not even sure it will, but it's going to be something that'll be done live by Netflix as they're walking into this new arena. I guess they've done a couple of other live things, but this will be their first sporting event as far as I know. Maybe it's even their first boxing. Whatever it is, it's going to be live, and it's set for July 20th. And they're unclear whether this is actually going to be a boxing match or whether this is going to be an exhibition. But there will be great curiosity about this. But I really, having watched Mike Tyson fight in his late 30s, I can't imagine what he's going to look like in his late 50s. But there is video of him in the ring. He looks cut. He looks strong. He looks like Mike Tyson. The problem is the reflexes slow down. And, 20 years after last really being in the ring in a real fight, what are we going to see from that? Well, we'll get to all of that. Let's get to what happened yesterday in Virginia. And we've had some great NBA players over the years named Jerry Lucas, Hall of Famer, won a championship with the Knicks. Really more of an outside shooting center than he was a rebounder and a muscle guy inside. And we also had Maurice Lucas, who wasn't really much of a shooter, but he was an enforcer. Great player with the Portland Trail Blazers, and I think he played for a couple of other teams as well. But he was the guy who used to protect Bill Walton, and those are the Lucases of the NBA. What we saw yesterday was a Lucas dunking on Governor Glenn Youngkin and Ted Leonsis as she led opposition to this bill, which would have provided a great deal of money for Ted to build his big complex that he keeps selling, telling everybody how great this is going to be for everybody, not just for Virginia. No, this is going to be great for D.C. too. But Louise Lucas was able to say, no, this is not going to happen in Virginia. She stripped plans for a new arena from the state budget, and they had been expected to approve that tomorrow, so that blocks Governor Glenn Youngkin's best shot at bringing the teams to Alexandria for now. I mean, things could change, but they seem unlikely at this point. The options left for Youngkin, who called this, a colossal mistake. What they can do is there are a couple of avenues where he could call a special session, or he could reintroduce it to the budget. He's going to be on the job for another year after this. So he got basically 2 more years in office, but there's only one term in Virginia. So the long-term haul on this is going to be very difficult for this. The plans had called for $1.5 billion from public funds, with Ted kicking in $400 million. Any public funding was dependent on state lawmakers agreeing to establish a stadium authority to issue bonds and oversee the arena. So that's not happening. And Youngkin had been, they always exaggerate these things on the jobs. He says the job market would be increased by 30,000 if you got this built. There would be billions of dollars in tax revenue. Said the arena would have no upfront costs, no new taxes, and would not impact the state's AAA credit rating. A woman by the name of Louise Lucas, who is a Democratic senator from Portsmouth, Virginia, made that impossible for it to happen right now. Not that it couldn't happen down the road, but once she was able to keep it off the state budget, she did her victory dance.
I'm feeling fantastic.
What were those negotiations like?
Why do you say fantastic?
Because we were able to, I think, save the taxpayers a ton of money by not putting the full faith and credit of the Commonwealth behind that project. People not just from Northern Virginia, but from all over the Commonwealth have sent me text messages and emails and phone calls and saying that they just don't like the idea of putting taxpayers' money behind a project of a billionaire. And so I'm toes down standing with the voters of Virginia.
Sounds like you, some of your colleagues, even Democrats, maybe ruffled a little bit of their feathers by...
Sure. They don't like the idea that I would not allow it to be heard. And it's not something that I do often, but when I feel strongly enough about it, that it's not in the best interest of the Commonwealth, then of course I'll do just as I did with this arena. Do
you think it jeopardizes a couple of the priorities that you were able to get done when they eventually head to the governor's desk?
Yes, I do. But I tell you what, when you feel strongly enough about something, you know you have to make some sacrifices. So I knew I wasn't going to be able to get everything that I wanted, because I wasn't going to let him get what he needed or wanted, whichever the case may be.
Is there still any room for compromise, and what's your message to Governor Youngkin, who's about to speak in a few minutes?
Compromise for me? How do you spell that word?
Like retail marijuana, minimum wage. Is he just going to veto everything now?
I suspect that he will be vetoing some things. I don't know exactly what they're going to be yet. But, in this whole scenario, you know that when you stand strongly against something that the governor wants, you know that you're going to lose something. So I anticipate that. So whatever it is, but, he's here for another 2 years. I'm here for 4. So I'll be able to get the things I want.
And what was your biggest objection to the arena? Was it the use of moral obligation bond?
Absolutely, and there were some other things too, and I guess I might as well just say it. Here you have Don Scott, who is the first African-American Speaker of the House. You got Luke Torian, who's the chair of House Appropriations. Got me over here as chair of Senate Finance and Appropriations. The last thing I would want to see while African-Americans have this level of leadership is for this thing to go south. Not on my watch. I wasn't about to take that risk.
Love it. Compromise for me? How do you spell that? She complained previously that no one had come to her about this idea previously, and she did get a chance to talk to Ted Leonsis on Wednesday. He came to the hotel where she stays during the legislative session, and also he brought along the government relations chief, Monica Dixon, and they sat down and talked, and Lucas said, we were disappointed in the legislature's decision not fully consider a proposal that promises transformative benefits for Alexandria and the entire Commonwealth. We remain hopeful the merits of the proposal will eventually get a fair hearing for this important project can advance for our fans, players, and employees and the residents of Virginia. That was the statement from Monumental. Lucas said about Leonsis, he was very nice. I told him maybe we'll get to work on some things in the future. So, maybe this thing isn't completely dead. The options for Governor Youngkin for reviving it is to introduce a budget amendment or send down a standalone bill. He indicated that he has no immediate plans to do so. He says the next step is for the General Assembly and particularly the Senate to embrace the opportunity. It's their move. Well, it doesn't sound promising for now. And I'm hopeful. I think a lot of fans are hopeful that Muriel Bowser gets back together with Ted Leonsis. The offer that they have for refurbishing the arena is $500 million. That's still sitting there. But according to a very long and detailed story that was in the Post a couple of weeks ago, the city had changed the terms when they were about to agree to the deal, in that Ted was supposed to put up that money and the district would pay him back for that. And that's when he had made this deal to go to Virginia. It was like, oh, they changed the terms. Well, watch this. And he made this deal with Youngkin. Maybe it's a lot of posturing. Maybe when this all settles out, when all the dust is clear here, they will have a deal in place so that they can have an arena that will stay in D.C. and the Caps and the Wizards will stay there. Let's hope. All right, Zach Ertz showed up yesterday on the Pat McAfee show. Ertz, I guess, would be the first free agent signing, but it's not. It doesn't work like it does with players who were on rosters at the end of the season. In other words, because Ertz was not under contract to any team when the season ended, he'd been cut by Arizona, got picked up by Detroit, but technically was not under contract for them. They were able to get this done before free agency officially opened next week. So he's in, and he's got history with Cliff Kingsbury. He played on the Arizona Cardinals for the last 3 years that Kingsbury was there after being traded from the Philadelphia Eagles. And the issue is his age. One, he's like 33. He played 9 years with the Eagles, won a Super Bowl with them, but has been injured a lot, has not played a full season in like 5 years. But it's the draw of working with Kingsbury that leads him here, as he told McAfee.
Cliff has been a huge part of my success the past few years in Arizona. And so when he got the job in Washington and I was a free agent, it was very easy for me to say, hey, this is a place that I would love to play for. They've essentially redone the entire building since when I first came into the league. New owner, new GM now, new head coach. And I've never heard anyone say a bad word about Dan Quinn. And so I'm extremely excited to play for him and get back on the East Coast is going to be fun.
Hell yeah, man. I think obviously Commanders fans have to be pretty excited about it all, about what the future could look like. You just laying out what you heard and your thoughts as somebody that's been introduced to this brand new chapter, it's going to get some people jacked up. Yeah. I think people are going to get a little zeked up over there about the future of the Commanders. Go ahead, AJ.
Zach, what does Cliff do, specifically as an offensive play caller? We hear people talk about the genius of what he is, and he spends 20 hours in the office studying everything and opponents and how to exploit them. What do you like that he does offensively?
Yeah, it's obviously I was kind of raised in the West Coast system at Stanford with Coach Harbaugh and Coach Shaw, and then my first couple of years with Chip were so different, and then Doug Peterson was completely different, but they all kind of had similar terminology. But when I got traded to Arizona years ago, I pretty much had to put everything aside I knew about offensive terminology and kind of rewire my brain just because it is so different from what I was in for so long. But I think the thing that's unique about Cliff is that he doesn't care where a play comes from. He doesn't care if it's a high school football game. He's open to all ideas. There's no totem pole that the OC has to have all the ideas, then the quarterback coach, and then the tight end coach. There's no pecking order with him. He's going to let all of his guys bring all these different game plan ideas. And he's going to get his guys the ball. That's one of the things he first told me when I got out there. He's like, hey, man, it doesn't matter if you're a receiver, tight end, running back. I'm going to get my guy touches. And so I'm excited about being back with him.
I'm assuming they're going to explore more options in free agency at tight end or maybe in the draft. I can't believe that Zach Ertz at his age with his injury history would be tight end one for them. But he is a guy who can step right in. I guess he could work, they now call it a room. He'd work the tight end room, show everybody what's going on. But as you hear more and more people talk about Cliff Kingsbury, and this is a big takeaway from me from what Ert said yesterday, this guy's a geek. He's probably not suited to be a head coach. He's a guy who likes to be in the film room all the time. And he's like a mad scientist looking at plays. And he's, here's Ertz telling you, he's even looking at what high schools are doing. And that's good in a way. It's probably bad to be a head coach. And that's the criticism you heard about Ertz in Arizona, that he was too focused on the offense and didn't take care of other things, seemed disinterested in the news conferences, and by the way, seemed a little disinterested in his introductory news conference here. So, that might be an encouraging thing, that they got a guy who's doing what he does best, and when he is left to just focus on running an offense, he's probably pretty good at it. Now, the McAfee show also was nudging Ertz a little bit, give it up. What are their plans at quarterback? And like Sergeant Schultz, he said he knew nothing.
I have no inside information in regards to the quarterback situation. I've played with a ton of different quarterbacks in my career, all different styles. My first game I played was with Michael Vick. So I've played with a bunch of different quarterbacks. And Cliff, what he's also really good at is making it easy for a quarterback. And so whether it's a guy at 2, or they trade up, or they trade down, or they sign a free agent, or Sam Howell plays. I honestly have no idea what their plan is at the quarterback position. But it's my job to create as much separation as possible to make their job as easy as possible. And I feel like that's what I've been able to do over the past 11 years of my career. And it's something that I look forward to being able to do again in Washington.
Just tell us, Zach.
I have no inside information. Call Cliff. Get him on the show, man.
Yeah, I'm sure Cliff Kingsbury will go on the show and tell him who they're going to draft at quarterback. One thing is for certain, though, if you listen to Chris Sims, and it's certain he says that if Washington stays at 2, that they won't be able to take Caleb Williams despite all this newfound interest in Jaden Daniels off the combine, even though he didn't throw there. We came away from that week saying, oh, golly, look, Jaden Daniels, he may be better than Caleb Williams. Pish posh, says Sims. We'll get to his take on that as he talked to Dan Patrick yesterday. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, Mike Kell is in for Tony today at 11 o'clock. Sunshine now, but tomorrow's supposed to be kind of a washout. Oh, well, still no snow, no complaints from me. Doing okay here. So out of the combine, you heard a lot of yak about, Jaden Daniels, Heisman Trophy winner. And Caleb Williams, yeah, he's really good. But there are some other issues there. Now, maybe that's been put to bed because he has talked to ESPN. And he said, no, I'm fine to go to Chicago. And, this story of his father asking if they could have a piece of the team, that's kind of been tamped down. But as there's just this dead time, this 6-week period before the draft, people have to yak. And some of the yak is Jaden Daniels may have moved ahead of Caleb Williams. He may be the better quarterback, and he may be the quarterback that the Bears take at number 1. Chris Sims, former quarterback himself in the NFL, now an analyst with Pro Football Talk, on yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show, asked about the quarterback race and who he thinks is the best. He left no gray area.
He's clearly number 1, right? I mean, he's in a class of his own. I feel as confident about this, and you run to the podium if you're Chicago. I feel as confident about this as I did about, Mahomes, C.J. Stroud, Lamar, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, whatever. I mean, this is to me slam dunk. And I say that not because I see Mahomes' magic and he's amazing at making plays outside the pocket and he's one of the most gifted on-the-run throwers, one of the most gifted throwers ever to come out of college football. He's in this draft class, he's by far the best in the pocket passer in the draft. He wants to stand in the pocket. He has the most patience I've ever seen for a college kid of hanging in the pocket with chaos around him and still going, wait, I'm going to throw the ball down the field. Other than Joe Burrow, Dan, I would go, he's the second best I've ever seen, and Burrow was special at this as far as evaluating him go. He's the second best I've ever seen as far as going through reads on the offense, on the field. Now, their offense wasn't good. It's not that good schematically. It's predictable. Everybody knows it. There's not much there. I'm not a fan of the air raid. They didn't run the ball. Their O-line wasn't very good. Their defense was historically bad. So that led to him to having to maybe force the issue a little bit there. But, man, the quarterbacking things, right? You want to talk about that, going through reads, appropriate throws, different types of throws. It's off the charts. Chicago should be running right now to the podium with the name in there. I mean, that's it. He is the man. He is the number one pick. He's as good as he's up there, was as good as I've ever seen coming out of college.
Then why do you have analysts, former quarterbacks, who are falling in love with Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, I mean, Jaden Daniels is really good. Jaden Daniels is the number one draft pick in a lot of years. You know, that is not Caleb Williams or C.J. Stroud or, you know, and a Patrick Mahomes in my ear. But
what's the biggest difference, though, between Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams?
Caleb Williams is an out-of-this-world special thrower. I mean, Caleb Williams is like, it's next level. It's it's the power in the arm, the amount of throws he has, right? The sidearm throws, all the different off the platform, off back foot, off 1 foot. You know, he's got every arm angle possible. He can just flick it with his wrist, right? He can throw on the run as good as anybody I've ever seen in college football, either side, right? So because I feel like, USC was 7-5 and he had a little regression this year, so now we're going to just crap on him, and it's not right? I mean, Jaden Daniels is really good. He really is. I mean, he is got great mechanics. He's really efficient in throwing the football. Right? He has great control of the ball. His arm is real good, but it's not great. It's not elite like Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is in a special stratosphere there, let alone he's not as good in the pocket as Caleb Williams. That's the thing I would say. I mean, Caleb Williams, you get to see plenty of plays where it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and he goes through it. And he's got a great feel for what's about to come open, let alone he's got a knack in the pocket that only a few people in the history of football have. And this is, to me, the Mahomes effect. He has the ability to look down the field and still see the rush and all see it clearly, right? I was led to believe, Dan, I mean, if you just go by talk, I thought Caleb Williams threw 40 interceptions this year. Oh, and then I'm starting this process, and, you know, that's the first time I pull up stats, and I go, 30-5? And 3 of them were in one game. And if you look at the context of the Notre Dame game a little bit there, they're not that hard to like figure out, or I could even maybe, you know, give him a pass for the first 2 interceptions. He takes care of the ball at an incredibly high level, especially for the way he plays and what he was asked to do to carry that team. So I don't know. That's one where I really like Jaden Daniels. And like I said, his ability to run, it is out of this world good. He's got good size to throw over the line of scrimmage. He can push the ball down the field, but making people miss in the pocket, not like Caleb Williams. Different arm angles. Jaden Daniels doesn't really have that. It's the same arm angle every throw.
You almost sound offended if somebody goes before Caleb Williams.
Yes, I would be offended. 100%. Thank you for saying that. That's what and again, let me just make this clear. I've never liked my top 5 quarterbacks more than I like the top 5 this year. And I put Jaden Daniels, as you've seen already, in a tier of his own at tier number 2 and classified it as he's the number 1 pick in most years. Caleb Williams, though, is slam dunk.
Okay, so there's no gray area there for Chris Sims. He's looked at the tape, and he's telling you Caleb Williams is by far the best quarterback in this draft, And then you drop down to Jaden Daniels, who's really good. And if Caleb Williams wasn't in this draft, he would be number one. But no. It's not even close. Now, keep in mind that Chris Sims 2 years ago really liked Zach Wilson and thought that was a real steal by the Jets at number 2. So you just don't know. Now, as far as where this is historically, just knowing Mel Kiper as I have for 25 years now, the time I felt like he was so certain that we had a quarterback that was far above the rest was when Andrew Luck came out of Stanford, and, of course, RG3 came here. And there were some people who said, maybe the upside is going to be a little higher for RG3. Well, Mel said, no. He said, this guy is Peyton Manning with athleticism. And under different circumstances, different team, protected better, maybe he would have been. But in the 7 years he played, he sure showed flashes of that, showed that he could, over a period of time, develop into that. And maybe even when he was healthy and playing at his peak, he was Peyton Manning with athleticism. This is an analyst. Keep in mind, he's been wrong, and he was wrong about Zach Wilson. But, man, there is just no doubt in Chris Sims' mind that Caleb Williams is by far the best quarterback in this draft. And you got to figure that the Bears know this. You got to think that they're just dangling it out there. Now, the complicating part of this is Justin Fields. And they had said that Fields, they would make a decision on his future before free agency. Well, they're running out of time because the legal tampering period starts on Monday and free agency opens next Wednesday. What are the Bears going to do? And why haven't we heard more rumors about who's really interested? Or maybe there just really isn't any interest in Justin Fields. And would they go to the extent, I don't think they would do it, although Fields is known as a really good guy. Would they go to the extent of drafting Caleb Williams at 1, keeping Fields on the team, and since they have control over him for another year, would they be able to look and see what happens during training camp? Does a team lose a quarterback? Does a team look at maybe a guy they drafted and say, ooh, no, he's not ready, and be willing to give up a third to bring in Justin Fields? We don't know. But the fact that they've waited this long, first they said, we'll get this done before the Combine. Well, now we're a week after the end of the Combine. They haven't gotten that done. We got free agency opening up next week. Could something happen this weekend? We don't know. But if you listen to Chris Sims, there is absolutely no doubt, or should be no doubt, in the minds of the Chicago Bears that Caleb Williams is 1. He likes Jaden Daniels, number 2. That would presume, I guess, that Washington keeps the pick and they get a guy who's really good, just not at the level of Caleb Williams. And then you've also got the Drake May factor. Now, there are some, like Tim Hasselback, who said, forget Caleb Williams, forget Jaden Daniels. Drake May is the best quarterback in this draft. Then you have others like Merrill Hodge, who's looked at the tape, and I trust his opinion as well. And he looked at Drake May and he said, not even a first-round pick. And there are some things there that you may not be able to fix. Sims has looked at the tape of May. He's not all the way towards Merrill Hodge, but he's not bumping his head either with Tim Hasselback. This is his review of Drake May.
Drake May, and again, this is where I don't like my job, right? There's a lot, there's things to like. There's no doubt about it. If you watch a highlight tape, you're going to go, wow, look at all those great throws. And he looks the part. He's prototypical, 6'4", 230, right? He's what people look for as far as those along those lines. But I don't care if it's the best game he's ever had or whatever. There is way too many throws and decisions that are not up to par to being a top 10 pick, a top 15 pick, a top 20 pick for that matter. He is a little bit of a project. He has mechanical issues. He makes throws, Dan, right? Even completions. I mean, go back, watch his game. He throws for 400 yards against Syracuse. 400 yards, I'm expecting, man, it's going to be one. He should have thrown for 700 yards. He misses people, completions where I go, ooh, if he throws this on the money, this guy's going to run for another 50 yards. They got to go down to the ground. They got to go behind them. Or the ball's not even in their vicinity, right? So there's work to be done there. I feel bad for Drake May, just because I feel like a lot of unqualified people made qualifying statements and built him up to a spot. But I have a hard time thinking the NFL is going to look at Drake May's tape. And I think you're going to hear more and more people where it's going to come down more to where I see it as the really important evaluators get into this, because you're going to realize, wait, decision-making raw, right? Movement in the pocket. He can really run straight away, but hopping around the pocket where the NFL making plays in that little area, that's extremely important. He does not thrive in that area, let alone there's way too many off-target throws. And that's where I say he's a little bit of a potential project. That's kind of how I classify Drake May.
No, that may not be the worst thing either, because if you have some confidence that Sam Howell can be kind of the rabbit for Drake May, that might make sense. You know, if you look at what Green Bay did in developing Aaron Rodgers 3 full years behind Brett Favre, and then Jordan Love 3 full years behind Aaron Rodgers, the jury's still out, but it looks like he's on his way. You know, might that be something they consider at 2? Maybe figuring the pro upside, the fact that he's got more of an NFL body than Jaden Daniels, might be worth it to have him stay for a year on the bench, mostly learning the system that Cliff Kingsbury has, and maybe by his second year he's ready to start, and you can discard Sam Howell. That may be a possibility, but on talent and ability alone, what Sims is telling you is there's Caleb Williams way up here, there's Jaden Daniels down here, and then if you go to Drake May, you got to be prepared to develop him. And, that may scare some teams off. Or maybe people look at Chris Sims and they say, you're a dope. You thought Zach Wilson was going to be really good. And such is the game that is played this time of year in the NFL. A couple of other football stories here. Dalton Schultz hasn't done the Texas 2-step. He's done the Texas 1-step. He signed with the Houston Texans for 3 more years. He had gone to Houston from Dallas last year and had become one of the top targets for C.J. Stroud. So after signing a $6 million deal last year, he gets paid with $36 million in a 3-year deal with $23.5 million guaranteed. And so in a kind of a congratulatory call yesterday on the Pat McAfee show, Schultz got to talking about his experience with Dallas. Now, he hasn't been there in a full year, and I don't know why this stuff hasn't spilled out since then, but did spill yesterday. And he was asked about the difference between playing for the Texans and the Cowboys. And Schultz said, the focus in Houston is just football. You know what I mean? I'm going back and telling some people about being around the Cowboys practice facility and game day and describing some of the interactions and stuff that you see on a day-to-day basis. And it surprises a lot of people. They're like, holy crap, that actually happens at a practice facility? You think it's normal, and then you come to a place like this. An example. Well, it's literally a zoo, dude. There's people tapping on the glass trying to get people's attention while they're doing power cleans or whatever. It's different. That's the brand they've built. That's what Jerry Jones likes. That's the way they run things. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't realize how many eyeballs and how much can be a distraction in the locker room just being in that facility until you go someplace else and you're like, holy crap, there's none of that. So, Jerry built this big practice complex. And as we look down the line, the Commanders, whatever they're going to be, may not even be called Commanders when it happens, when this new stadium is built, they're going to have a brand new practice facility too. But Jerry has marketed this thing so that he's bringing people through while the players are working out. And here's, some guy with a pot belly and a Cowboys T-shirt banging on the glass. Hey, look at me over here. Can you do that power clean one more time? And so that's and now the Cowboys have insisted they don't have a culture problem. Culture's really a great buzzword, right? Ron Rivera talked about how he turned around the culture here. Really didn't. But it's just a little peek into how things work in Jerry world. I guess you kind of get used to it after a while. He did. He thought, well, this is the NFL. This is how it works. And then he goes to Houston and they go, no, we don't fool around with that Michigas. And then this from the cold playoff game between the Chiefs and the Dolphins, where the game kicked off, was January 13th at Arrowhead Stadium. Kickoff -4, -27 wind chills. And we had heard after the game that at least 10 fans had to be hospitalized with either frostbite or hypothermia, probably some of those dopes who took off their shirts. Well, now here we are almost 2 months later, and Dr. Megan Garcia, a general surgeon at Kansas City's Grossman Burn Center, says that 70% of the patients referred to them from the game for frostbite injuries are being advised to schedule amputations. Yeah, it's that serious. And the league has been asked about, at what point do you postpone a game? And they say, no, we don't do that. Now, the one thing, because we heard some players who played in the Ice Bowl in '67 when they didn't have the kind of technology that they have for cold, and you watch the game on film, and you'd see most of the players aren't even wearing gloves. And you did hear that some players did have frostbite on the tips of their fingers, or some had after effects of playing in that game for a long time. But what you saw in the stands were hardy Green Bay fans, all of them bundled up. These idiots who take their shirts off at these games, well, they're just asking for something like this. And I don't know if any of them are included in this group, and we don't know how many are being advised for amputations, other than this number of 70% of the patients referred were recommended for amputations. This is some pretty serious stuff. And yes, I guess the game has to go on. There's just too much money riding on it, and football's a game that's played in the elements, and all that, fire and brimstone talk that you have with these playoff games every year. But you got to monitor the fans a little bit. You got to keep them from doing stupid things to themselves. And when they're liquored up coming in for a night game, they're not really realizing the kind of damage that they're doing to their bodies. And look, the Super Bowl is headed towards President's Day weekend. It's inevitable. The league is going to go to 18 games. So that means that the playoffs are going to start another week later, and these cold weather cities that don't have domes like they do in Minneapolis, you're going to be subjected to more of this. And Patrick Mahomes is still a young guy. He's 28 years old. He could be around another 10, 12, 13, 14 years. And they could be playing these home playoff games for a long, long time. This is something that they have to be worried about. It's one thing to see a guy with his body all red from the cold, and you go, oh, God, he must be out of his mind, to, oh, my, he had to have 4 fingers amputated or whatever. It's not. It takes on a different light, doesn't it? Takes on a totally different light. All right, coming up, I want to get to the anniversary, the 53rd anniversary of Ali Frazier won at Madison Square Garden, and tie it in to Mike Tyson, who has reportedly signed to make a comeback with Jake Paul, who is big on social media, fights MMA. Boxing's pretty much dead, and not that this is going to bring it back to life, but this is the state of boxing now, and Mike Tyson at 58 will be making a comeback in July if this actually happens. Tony and Mike weighed in on it yesterday on PTI. We'll get to their thoughts and much more in the next hour. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. All right, heading towards the weekend. Mike Callow sits in for Tony at 11 o'clock. Coming up, we'll get to what Andy Reid said yesterday on the Rich Eisen Show about how seriously he considered retirement. Also, a story about Andy Reid's son. If you weren't following this, he has a son who was on the coaching staff with the Chiefs, not this year, but last year. And as they were in the playoffs, he got in his car drunk and rear-ended a car, seriously injured a 5-year-old girl who may never fully recover from it. Got a 3-year jail sentence, and sentence was commuted by the governor of Missouri, probably somewhat in the euphoria of the Super Bowl championship. And with all the good feelings about Andy Reid, there's a lot of family issues there that not necessarily have any effect on football or anything else, but there's things that should be talked about, should be mentioned, and we will get to that coming up later this hour. I've said this many, many times over the years, and I've really, when I look back on it and all the things that I've seen in my life and all the great sporting events I've been able to witness, there's one that still stands out, and it was 53 years ago today. It was the first Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier fight. They fought 3 times. The second one was, it was okay. Ali won. It was at Madison Square Garden. It was a couple years later. There was hype for it, but it wasn't the same. But since they split the 2 fights, then you had to have the rubber match, the tie-breaking fight. And that doesn't take place until 1974, and that's the Thrilla in Manila. And that is considered to be one of the greatest fights ever. And finally, Yank Durham threw in the towel for Frazier before the 15th round. They used to go 15 in those days. And there was a reason to believe that one of them was going to die in the ring. That's how hard they fought in that fight. And Ali walked away. And Dave Kindred, who wrote a great book about Muhammad Ali and Howard Cosell called The Sound and the Fury, and he wrote that at that point in that fight, Ali had only one thing to trade while that fight was going on, and that was his future. And Dave believes that, yes, there was the Parkinson's syndrome, but there was probably some brain damage that came along with that, and it could have been very much related to that fight. Now, sadly, Ali didn't leave after that. He continued to fight until 1981, and it was really a sad ending with his really last fight with Larry Holmes. And Holmes, who had been his sparring partner, was crying when it was over because he had just beaten a defenseless Ali who refused to go down and refused to end the fight. So it shouldn't have gone that long. But the 3 Ali-Frazier fights, at least for my generation, I can't speak to what it was like with Joe Louis and Max Schmeling and fighters of that era. But for my lifetime, there's nothing bigger than Ali Frazier. And the buildup to one was just beyond belief because Ali had been banned from boxing for 3 years. He had refused to enter the service after being drafted. He was a conscientious objector. He later went to court and was exonerated for that. And his biggest backer through all of that was Howard Cosell. That's how they became really lifetime friends. And so Ali had given up probably 3 of his best years. So by the time he came back, he was in his late 20s, going on 30. And he fought a couple of tune-up fights, and he looked like Ali, but not Ali in his prime, not the Ali shuffle, the quickness, all the things that he showed in the early to mid-'60s. He had won the Olympic gold medal as a light heavyweight in 1960 and then came out and just was, dazzling everybody with his speed and his quickness in the ring, not to mention his quickness with his mouth. He was the greatest fight promoter there ever was. And while he was in exile, Joe Frazier, who was kind of a puncher. Ali was a boxer. He had great skill and quickness and just looked like a dancer out there. Joe Frazier was relentless. He was like a steam engine, and he won the heavyweight championship with the vacated title from Ali, but nobody believed that he was the best fighter out there. I mean, what we saw from Ali prior to him being banned from boxing in, I think, 1967 was one of the greats of all time. I mean, the skill as a boxer, we had never seen this before. So while Frazier held the title, most really didn't believe that he was the true heavyweight champion. Most believed that the people's choice was Muhammad Ali. Now, as beloved as Ali became late in life, especially when he had Parkinson's, he was a highly controversial figure at that time. And he was somebody that was brash and outspoken, and there were some people who were still very uncomfortable that he had changed his name from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali because he had joined the Muslim religion. And in many ways, the white people's champion was Joe Frazier because Joe Frazier was more conventional. He acted like people wanted a fighter to act, and Ali didn't do that. Ali was his own man. I mean, he was an incredible cultural figure as well as an incredible athlete. And so finally, this fight comes together. And, Ali eventually gets back into the ring. I don't remember exactly how the courts worked it all out, but he had actually made a comeback fight, I think, in Atlanta a year before. And that kind of opened the door for this to happen. And the fight was set up at Madison Square Garden for March 8th of 1971. And the way that this would be a moneymaker, because you didn't have cable TV in those days, the way you'd make it as a moneymaker was closed circuit, that they would show this fight in theaters. I didn't see it in the theater. They delayed it a week and showed it on Wide World of Sports the following Saturday with I think the two fighters were there, if I'm not mistaken, with Howard Cosell, and you actually got to watch the fight with them. So I didn't see it live, but the fight was going to be such a draw that the prize money, remember, this is a time, early 70s, if an athlete's making $100,000 a year, that's a lot of money. There's like just a handful of guys making that kind of money. Joe Namath, maybe Willie Mays, guys like that. You got to be real star power to be making $100,000 a year. And we learn that the two fighters are going to split $5 million. The purse is $5 million, so $2.5 million apiece. Well, people in 1971 who were millionaires were considered to be rich. If you had $1 million, you were rich. So for one night's work, two fighters were each going to get $2.5 million. There weren't many people in the country that had the kind of money to put up $5 million. One who did was Jack Kent Cooke. Now, Cooke had owned the Redskins at that time, but the NFL had a rule that if you owned sports franchises in other sports, you couldn't be the, I guess, president of a team. So Edward Bennett Williams was running the Redskins at that time, but Jack Kent Cooke was really the owner. But he owned the Forum, he owned the Lakers, and he owned the Kings. And he had the cash to put up $5 million for the purse to be split. I mean, that was like mind-blowing. And the buildup was enormous. You didn't just see coverage of this in the sports on TV. There was no ESPN at that time. But you would turn on the evening news, and Walter Cronkite has got a piece on the buildup to the fight and how big this is going to be. And so the fight finally happens at Madison Square Garden. If I'm not mistaken, it was a Monday night. And the celebrities that showed up for that, long before you'd see Jack Nicholson and Diane Cannon sitting at Laker games. That was like a decade away when Magic Johnson brought Showtime there. You didn't see celebrities there on a regular basis. And there was no bigger celebrity than Frank Sinatra at that time. And Sinatra wanted to see the fight. And I guess he either didn't want to pay for a ringside seat. I can't imagine he couldn't get one if he wanted it. No, he got a photographer's pass, and he took pictures for Life magazine. The broadcast of the fight, the analyst was an actor, a very successful and well-known actor, Burt Lancaster, who had won, I don't know if he won an Academy Award, but I believe he'd been nominated a couple of times, and he did the analysis of the fight with Don Dumphy. I mean, this was just enormous. And they went 15 rounds, and very famously, the left hook by Joe Frazier decked Ali. Ali had never been knocked down before, and he got decked by Joe Frazier in the 15th round. It was a wicked left hook, which looked like it came from his waist, and Ali got right up. That was like a sign of, oh my God, this guy is not from this earth. And he got back and he finished the fight. He didn't win the fight, but it was a classic fight. And Frazier was the one who actually wound up being hospitalized, not Muhammad Ali. And that's what led to really was a golden period of boxing, because George Foreman came along. He had been the Olympic champion in 1968. Frazier and Ali, and they dominated the sport and dominated talk of when they were going to get back together. I mean, Frazier was so beat up from that fight, he didn't fight very often after that. You know, it wasn't until they got back together, I think it was like a year and a half later, that they fought again at Madison Square Garden, and then 2 years later, they had the Thrilla in Manila. And Ali was cruel to Frazier. He was. He walked around. He had a plastic gorilla, and he called him a gorilla, and he would show, here I'm punching him. He was building up, interest in the fight, but he was cruel. He was cruel to him. I mean, there were just so many levels of this matchup, and just to think of what happened on this day 53 years ago. And I was 12 years old. And I remember the day of the fight, and I'm thinking about it all day, and I said, just can't imagine Ali losing. And I went to bed before it was over, and I remember waking up the next morning. I used to wake up to Johnny Holliday's morning show, and Tony Roberts did the sports. And Johnny, skilled radio guy, 1971, teased it. He said, and coming up, Tony Roberts has the sports with the results of last night's fight. And it was like 4 minutes of commercials, and I was like, like shaking in my bed. And when he said that Frazier had won the fight, it just floored me. It just absolutely floored me. And it set up a period which, for boxing, what we've seen in recent years is unimaginable. It's unimaginable how big boxing was compared to where it is now, which is basically dead. And that leads us to what is due to happen. I still don't know if this is going to come off, but Netflix announced yesterday that it will stream a match between Mike Tyson and Jake Paul on July 20th, and they're holding this at Jerry World, AT&T Stadium. Well, Jesus, they can probably seat 90,000 people there for a fight. I don't know if they'll draw that, but Tyson is 58. The last time he had a real fight, and I was at this was against Kevin McBride at the then MCI Center, and it was no match. I mean, it looked like at one point Tyson was trying to break his arm. He'd get him in a clinch, and he'd pop his elbow back and forth trying to break his arm. And then McBride was like 6'2", 6'3". Tyson's maybe 5'10". He was trying to launch himself to headbutt him. I mean, it was just an awful fight. And after it was over, I remember I was standing next to Mike Wilbon, and Tyson's doing his news conference, and he says, "That's it, I'm done." He says, he owed the IRS a lot of money. He says, "I'll have to figure out a way to pay you back. I might just fade off into Bolivian." And then he got into a white limousine with John Saraceno. Never forget that. And he never fought again. Now, 2020, he fought Roy Jones, but that was an exhibition. That was not a real fight. The Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, which is, I guess, going to license this fight at Jerry World in Texas, said the promoter requested the July 20th date but did not submit any details about the card as to whether it's going to be an actual fight or an exhibition. 58 years old. We'll have to see. Tony and Mike, who are Mike's my age, Tony's a little older. Tony actually did cover some of Ali's fights. This was their look at this, and probably because of their age, they may be a little bit more excited than this event is due.
Mike Tyson is going back in the ring. Yes, Mike Tyson at 58 will fight 27-year-old Jake Paul, who you remember from your YouTube surfing, I'm sure. It will be in July at Jerry World. At Jerry World. It'll be live on Netflix. Well, you've got to be intrigued by this.
Look, anytime you say Mike Tyson and boxing and in the ring, even at 58, because, Tony, the sport is just, it's gone to hell. It doesn't exist at the level you and I obsessed over it from birth until whatever, 15 years ago. So, yes, Mike Tyson, you know what I do now, Tony, on my Instagram feed somehow? Mike Tyson knockouts come up. Various Mike Tyson knockout clips, reels. I immediately send these to younger people. I say, look at this. Don't tell me about MMA. Look at Mike Tyson. Look at him knock people out, starch them within a minute of a first round. These things were so exciting. And I saw Mike Tyson back to the box office. We know Mike, and we like to see this. But, Tony, I'm going to watch. I'm not going to lie. But this Paul guy, I mean, part of me just wants Tyson to literally knock him out in some comic way out of the ring like they used to have in the cartoons. Yeah. But I'm intrigued. Yes.
My first reaction was, I got to get Netflix. And my second reaction was, is this actually going to happen? Is this going to be a real boxing match, or is it going to be some exhibition where they wear headgear and they're 1 minute rounds? But I would watch this. In July, I would watch this ahead of the Wimbledon final. I would do that. Mike Tyson is 58. This other guy, I would. This other guy, Jake Paul, is 27,
knocked
so that's
out Nate Robinson.
30 years.
Nate Robinson's still unconscious.
He's knocked out a bunch of people. His brother, I think, is in the WWE. So I'm willing to believe that Jake Paul is a tough kid who knows what he's doing. So the question becomes for me, how much does Mike Tyson have left at this ridiculous age to box at 58? Because if he's got a lot left, that's the end of Jake Paul. That's the end of Chris Paul. Because this is Mike Tyson. This isn't some guy from the Food Lion. But I don't know. Jake Paul probably isn't afraid of him. You and I are afraid of him.
Yes,
we watched him.
today.
We saw him.
We know. We were there.
We saw him.
Ringside, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, boxing.
We
miss
would root.
boxing. We do.
We would root.
Fellas. Again, it's been almost 20 years since Tyson fought, and he wasn't good against a tomato can named Kevin McBride. What's this going to look like? Now, as far as Chris Paul goes, not Chris Paul, Jake Paul. He got me confused. Pretty good line. He'd knock out Chris Paul, too. He has a 9-1 record. And when Wilbon said, Nate Robinson is still knocked out, Nate Robinson is a former basketball player. So, a lot of this 9-1 record is not really against real boxing competition, such as it is. I mean, we don't even know who boxes anymore because the sport basically committed suicide with pay-per-view for everything. Because, again, when I was a kid, you used to be able to watch some of Ali's fights live on regular free TV. The Ken Norton fight where Ali fought with a broken jaw and stayed in there for 15 rounds, losing in a decision. That was a Saturday afternoon on ABC. He fought Ernie Shavers on a Friday night on CBS in the 70s. That used to happen. And while they weren't bringing in the cash that they got from pay-per-view, people were familiar with the sport more. Well, we don't have that anymore. And now we have what will be a 58-year-old Mike Tyson facing a 27-year-old maybe fighter or MMA or social media influencer or whatever he is. And just the contrast of that from 53 years ago tonight, where we had, I think, boxing at its peak with Ali Frazier 1 to this. This is what it is. And as much as Tony may be romantic about seeing Mike Tyson when he was, knocking people out 10, 15 seconds into a fight, that's not him anymore. That was a long, long time ago. That's 35 years ago. Tyson was, I think, the youngest heavyweight champion, like 20, 21, something like that. It's 58. Your reflexes slow down. It's a different ball game. It's a lot different. All right, Mike's running a few minutes late, so I'll handle things for just a bit. We'll have part of me and a lot of Mike coming up next. It's the Andy Pollin Show transitioning to the Tony Kornheiser Show, ESPN 630.